I discovered my daughter-in-law's stolen car for sale. An incredible journey of hidden truth. John's heart raced at the sight of the listing. A vintage Dodge Dart, the exact model Katie had once spoken about with admiration, now tagged as stolen. The name beneath the photo, his daughter-in-law's, sent a jolt through him. Stolen? Panic surged through the tendrils of his mind. He immediately pictured the small-town whispers that would spin tales about their family. Faces filled with judgment, smirking and shaking heads. His son's wife wrapped in scandal. The weight of reputation nestled heavy on his shoulders. In this community, a clean name was worth everything. Fueled by a mix of worry and determination, John tucked his pride and instincts deep. He should confront Katie, tackle the mystery head-on, but a pit of fear anchored him. She was already under strain, tirelessly juggling 2 kids, her job at the diner, and unrelenting judgments that echoed among their neighbors. Could he add to it? A confrontation about her stolen car? What would the neighbors think? Would they immediately label her a fraud? John envisioned the families sharing coffee on porches, gossip feeding like wildfire. He hesitated, triggering an internal battle, torn between loyalty to Katie and the moral obligation to uphold honesty. Am I doing the right thing? He thought, grappling with his principles. Digging deeper felt necessary. He recalled the times he had defended her against the scornful murmurs, wondering, could this really paint her as another one of those less-than stories? He was stuck, caught between wanting to protect her from public scrutiny and pursuing the truth that gnawed at his gut. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. After wrestling with the dilemma, John surrendered to the instinctual pull, a desperate need to uncover the truth. He approached Katie's home, heart drumming loud enough to drown out the familiar sounds of their suburb. Kids laughing, a lawnmower buzzing a street over. Each step felt agonizing, a soldier marching into enemy territory. As he rang the doorbell, knots twisted in his stomach. Was he instigating a fissure in the family bond, or seeking justice? When Katie answered, her face fell as she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, worry ripple across her brow. There was no padding words. He dove right in, accusing eyes searching for a flicker of honesty. "It's your car, Katie. It's up for sale," he said, feeling the strain in his own voice, a chasm of confusion forming. The ensuing silence screamed louder than any argument he could conjure. With each moment passing, that silence tethered him deeper into the dark waters of doubt. Then, in a flash, emotions erupted. "You know it was sold, right? It was my father's debt. He needed the money," she confessed, words pouring with shame. The revelation landed like a thunderclap, his mind racing as her voice dropped lower, along with her light. Honesty or loyalty? 2 sides of a coin spiraling out of control. Could he support her when it came to protecting family pride? A violent storm of judgment brewed in his gut. The dealer's name swarmed his thoughts, corruption lurking just beneath the surface. As he prepared for a final confrontation, uncertainty held him hostage, questioning whether he was fighting for family or simply seeking redemption from his own past mistakes. John stood at the threshold, grappling with the aftermath of Katie's confession. The warmth that usually radiated from family gatherings had been replaced by a cold wave of uncertainty. How had matters devolved so quickly? This was not just a case of a car for him. It was a reflection of deeper currents swirling in their lives. Looking into Katie's eyes, he saw fear, but also frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "What do you mean your father needed the money? Why didn't you tell anyone?" The words escaped his mouth, filled with an urgency he hadn't anticipated. With each question, he felt like he was prying open a Pandora's box. Katie stepped back, pressing her hands against her temples as if trying to push away the chaos. "He didn't want to burden anyone. We managed for so long. I thought I could fix it without dragging you all into this." John felt a jolt of shame. In his desire to protect the family image, had he unwittingly placed unbearable pressure on her to maintain appearances? "Katie, we're family. We can handle this together." His voice softened as he reached out, trying to bridge the distance that seemed to stretch between them now. But the battle raged within her. "What if we can't? What if this ruins everything we've worked for? My father, he's made mistakes, but he's not a bad person. It's just complicated. Complicated." The word hung in the air like a banner of unspoken fears. John's mind churned. How could mistakes from the past spiral into a nightmare for the present? He thought of his own history, the decisions he'd made that still cast shadows on his family today. Were those ghostly echoes coming back to haunt them? "Maybe we need to look into it more," he proposed, cautioning against jumping to conclusions. "Can we trace where the car went? Start from there?" Katie hesitated, the tension visible in her shoulders. "And face more judgment? More whispers?" John's heart sank. This wasn't simply about the car. It symbolized something far more visceral, a split between loyalty and vulnerability. In choosing truth, would they invite scrutiny or foster understanding? "We can control the narrative, Katie, but not if we bury it. The world isn't as harsh as we think it is." As he spoke, something within him awakened, a fierce protectiveness that urged him onward. He had always shied away from confrontation, inhaling the toxic fumes of avoidance. But now, a purpose bubbled beneath the surface. "Let's go together," he proposed, the idea crystallizing like a beacon of hope. "Let's find the dealer, discover the story behind the car. We deserve answers, and so does your father." Katie searched his gaze, and in that moment, John sensed something shift. Perhaps it was the deep-seated trust between them, or maybe the realization that change was unavoidable. "You really think we can do this?" "I know we can." The certainty erupted from him, no longer a timid spark flickering in the shadows. Thus began a new chapter, the quest for truth. Together they would unearth not just the fate of the car, but delve into the tangled web of family, secrecy, and resolution. Emboldened by their alliance, John felt an unfamiliar warmth coursing through him, a sense of agency that had long eluded him. In resolving this crisis, not only would he support Katie, but he might also finally confront the shadows of his past choices. But as they prepared to face the unknown, something within John darkened. What would they uncover? Amidst the fragile bond of family lay potential for greater mysteries, twisting situations he hadn't anticipated. The weight of their decision began to settle, leaving an unsettling question echoing in his mind. What if the truth they uncovered were worse than they feared? John and Katie stepped into the crisp air outside, the pavement still damp from an earlier rain. The chill invigorated him, wiping away the remnants of uncertainty clinging to his psyche. With every step away from the threshold of their home, he felt the gravity of their decision deepening. The transition from passive observer to active participant ignited a mix of trepidation and resolve within his chest. "Do you have any idea where to start?" Katie asked, glancing sideways at him as they approached the car. The question carried the weight of their fears, hanging between them like a dense fog. "We'll go to the local dealer first," John replied, his resolve crystallizing further. Even if the car is gone, they may still have records. Tony, the owner, usually keeps detailed logs. We need to approach him carefully. He might know more than meets the eye. Katie nodded but didn't meet his gaze. Her uncertainty gnawed at the edge of his determination. He understood her struggle. Facing the repercussions of her father's actions felt monumental. But he couldn't allow her fear to smolder into avoidance. As he drove, John forced himself into a meditative state, flooding his mind with team-like strategies. Listen intently, ask pointed questions, maintain a calm demeanor, and discover the unseen threads connecting the car to her father's financial troubles. In this moment of planning, he found a strange clarity about himself that he'd longed for, but never truly embraced. Pulling into the dealer's lot, the surroundings seemed to cocoon them in a hostile silence. Rows of shiny cars sat idle under the bright lights, far removed from the turmoil swirling in their minds. He parked and turned to Katie. "Are you ready for this?" Her eyes shimmered with unspoken fear, and there was a flicker of something else, perhaps hope. "I think I can manage." "Together," he reiterated, squeezing her hand before they stepped out. Inside the dealership, the ambiance shifted. The polished surfaces reflected anxious smiles and unyielding professionalism that felt almost suffocating. John approached the front desk with Katie trailing a half-step behind. He could sense her discomfort. "Hi, I'm looking for Tony," he said, tilting his head as they waited. The receptionist's smile faded momentarily as she checked the schedule. "He's in a meeting. Can I help you with something?" A wave of frustration crashed over John, but he tamped it down. "We're trying to trace a car that was sold recently. We believe it might be linked to a family issue. Could you check the records for us?" "Sorry, but it's against policy." The dismissal fell like a crushing weight, dragging his confidence down into the pit of reluctance. But instead of retreating into passivity, he felt a spark. This was why he was here, to challenge boundaries, to uncover the truth for Katie and her family. "Look, I understand your policy," he began, his voice steady. "But this is an urgent matter, not just a business transaction. Can you at least take a message?" His determination was growing, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the surge of assertiveness overcoming his habitual compliance. "Fine, I'll see what I can do." While they waited for Tony to become available, John turned to Katie, his heart pounding both from excitement and anxiety. "Whatever happens here, we're on the same team. Remember that." Her eyes widened as the weight of the moment anchored them both. "What if he tells us something we don't want to hear? What if it's worse? Maybe we'll find a way." John replied, the words a silent promise to her and himself. With each passing second, the fear of what was lurking in the shadows began to meld with a spark of determination, one that made him question where this journey would take them. As Tony finally approached, the tension in the air sliced deeper, the imminent reveal cloaked in a veil of uncertainty. John's breath hitched. What awaited them in that conversation could shake the foundations of both their families. Would they uncover demoralizing truths, or forge paths to redemption? As he looked into Katie's eyes, one question settled in his heart. Could he guide them through whatever storm lay ahead? The moment of confrontation was here, and John was on the brink of awakening something within himself. Something he had long overlooked, but which was now demanding to emerge. How would he navigate the answers that lay just beyond the door of revelation? Tony stepped forward, his demeanor a mixture of business formality and underlying concern. John felt the weight of his gaze as he extended a hand in greeting. With an almost imperceptible nod, he introduced himself. John sensed the knot of tension in the air as Katie maintained her grip on his arm. "Thanks for meeting with us, Tony," John began, his voice steady as he forced himself to appear unshakable. "We're here about a car that was sold recently. It's important for us to find out more about it." Tony's expression flickered momentarily before he nodded, inviting them into a small meeting room. The walls were adorned with abstract art that offered a warm contrast to the steely, business-like atmosphere. As they seated themselves, the gravity of the moment sunk deeper. "What's the specific car you're referring to?" Tony asked, leaning back in his chair. There was a calculated coolness about him, a professional facade that John knew he had to breach. "It was well, it belongs to Katie's father," John replied, searching for the right words. "He was in some trouble, and we think it might connect to his financial issues." A crease formed between Tony's brow. "Your father-in-law was facing legal problems, yes? I remember hearing about it. Did he have the car when all that started?" "Yes," Katie interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "We believe it was sold right before everything unraveled." John took a deep breath, steeling himself for the revelations that could unfold. "We're hoping you can help us trace its whereabouts. We need to understand how it's connected to everything that's happened." Tony crossed his arms, deep in thought. "I can look into the records for you, but if it was a private sale, there may not be much to work with. The details can get complicated." As he spoke, John caught a glimpse of the man's hesitations, the flickering uncertainty in his eyes. It was a vulnerability that mirrored his own. "There must be something you can tell us," John pressed, leaning forward as he sensed an opportunity. "Even if it's just fragments, every detail counts. This isn't just about the car. It's about clearing Katie's family name." The weight of John's urgency seemed to resonate with Tony. He slowly relaxed his stance. "You're right. Let me see what I can do." In that fleeting moment of connection, John realized he was becoming more than a passive bystander in Katie's turmoil. He was stepping forward, intentionally seeking answers, his own fear being reshaped into a purpose. It ignited a sense of capability he had never fully acknowledged. As Tony gathered his notes, Katie's anxious energy rippled beside him. "What if he can't find anything?" she whispered, her worry almost palpable. "We can't allow ourselves to think like that," John replied, his voice low yet firm as he steadied himself. "Whatever happens, we'll adapt. We'll make sense of it together." The minutes stretched into agonizing silence as they awaited updates. For John, it was a test of resolve. He observed his own fraying edges of patience, each tick of the clock mirroring his heartbeat. How had he let his fear govern his approach for so long? Today, he was reclaiming parts of himself he thought were lost. Finally, Tony returned, his expression somber. "I found something, but it's not good news. The car wasn't sold. It was impounded after your father-in-law's arrest." The words hit John like a physical blow, but the tight grip of his determination held firm. This wasn't the end. It was a doorway. "What can we do?" he asked breathlessly, while Katie stiffened beside him, bracing for the fallout. "From there, you'll need to approach the impound lot," Tony explained, his voice steeling. "But be prepared. They're not going to hand it over easily." With the unexpected truth crashing down around them, John felt the remnants of doubt within him begin to ignite a fierce resolve. The journey was only beginning, but now they had a tangible target: to confront an entity that promised complications. As they walked out of the dealership, a sense of purpose propelled him forward, ready to tackle the next obstacle. Katie's grip on his arm had strengthened, and with every step toward the impound lot, he could feel her unease meld with growing defiance. The real challenge lay ahead. He had to equip himself not only to retrieve a car, but to face the storm of conflict that resonated through Katie's life. John looked at her as understanding settled in. This wasn't merely about a car. It was about reclaiming her past, and with each stride, they drew closer to a confrontation that could either break them or fortify their bond. What clarity awaited within the impound's gates? And could he bolster his resolve enough to navigate the brewing storm that loomed on the horizon? John and Katie approached the impound lot, the looming metal gates promising a confrontation wrapped in uncertainty. It was an unremarkable structure, yet the air felt charged as if past struggles whispered from its concrete walls. John's earlier determination contorted into a tight knot in his stomach. Could he really face whatever lay beyond? Katie's hand tightened around his, an anchor in the sea of doubt threatening to pull him under. "What if they refuse to talk to us?" she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We'll present our case," he replied, mustering conviction he wasn't entirely sure he felt. "We have every right to ask about the car." With a deep breath, they stepped through the entrance. The lot was alive with muffled sounds, mechanical clinks, and the occasional shout from the nearby office. Each sound echoed John's internal conflict. He was stepping into a world dictated by rules and authority, one he was no longer accustomed to navigating. "Stay close," he instructed, glancing down at Katie. She appeared fragile, yet resilient, a combination that both unsettled and inspired him. As they approached the front desk, a middle-aged man sat behind it, his expression hard and unyielding. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone implying that the answer would likely be a definitive no. "We're here about a car that was impounded," John said, his voice steady despite the gnawing fear clawing at his confidence. "It belongs to Katie's father." He felt the weight of his words. They carried the history of a family's struggles. The attendant glanced at him skeptically, his eyebrows arching. "All vehicles go through a process. If you're looking for information, you'll have to provide proof of ownership." Panic flared within John. The rules were sharp, and he hadn't anticipated this layer of complexity. "We don't have that. But we believe this car may be crucial for—" "Look, kid," the man interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "You'll need to step aside and gather your paperwork. I can't help you without it." A rush of frustration erupted in John, threatening to spill over. He felt small and insignificant, but within that space, he noticed a flicker of defiance, that same fire igniting in Katie's eyes. "We can't stand by while the truth is out of our reach," he thought, a new strategy forming. "I can't just walk away," he resolved silently. "We're not leaving without answers. Can you at least tell us where the car is?" Katie interjected, her voice trembling but filled with an intensity that surprised him. The attendant hesitated, a crack forming in his stoic demeanor. "It's in storage," he replied reluctantly. "But that doesn't mean you'll get to see it. Can you at least send us the details on how to obtain the vehicle?" John pressed. He could feel the tension thickening in the air. This was more than simply retrieving a car. It was an assertion of their shattered rightful claim. After a long pause, the attendant sighed, rifling through screen entries. "Fine, I'll print the report. But understand this. Once the paperwork is in order, you're going to need to pay fees, and it can take time." John nodded, fighting back a rush of excitement blurring his thoughts. This was a foothold. "We'll find a way to make it happen. We're willing to fight for it." As the attendant turned away to process the request, John felt Katie's grip loosen a little. "They might not make it easy," she cautioned, scanning their surroundings. "I know," he replied. "But that just means we have to be ready for whatever comes next." Her eyes searched his face for reassurance. He held her gaze steady, her resolve woven deep into each word. "If this is what we have to do, then we'll do it together. We are finally taking back what was lost." As they waited, John found strength in the prospect of action. The lack of paperwork hadn't sealed their fate. It had ignited a new path. They were entering a fight, not simply for a car, but for closure, for dignity, for family. Yet as they stood there, he couldn't shake the gnawing question. Would they be able to withstand the trials yet to come? Would their unified front hold under the pressure? When the attendant returned with the printed paperwork, his expression hardened again. Here, don't lose this. You've got some steps ahead before you even think of driving that thing. John took the document, eyes sharpened with determination, realizing they were at the precipice of a much larger struggle. Each step leading up to this moment had prepared him for the unknown obstacles on the horizon. And just as he felt a surge of momentum, doubt slithered back in. What awaited them on the other side of this next battle? The moment they stepped out of the impound lot, John felt the weight of the printed report in his hand. But it was the growing pressure in his chest that consumed him. It wasn't just about retrieving a car anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind why it was taken in the first place, and confronting whatever forces had conspired against Katie's family. "Okay, what's next?" Katie asked, her voice steadying. She was shifting from fear to a quiet resolve that mirrored his. John took a deep breath and tried to organize his thoughts, recalling every detail of their conversation with the attendant. "We need to figure out the fees and the process to get the vehicle back. But more than that, we have to learn why it was impounded. This feels bigger than just a mistake." "I can try calling a lawyer," Katie suggested, her eyes now sparkling with the kind of determination he hadn't seen before. It was inspiring, leaving behind lingering traces of their earlier fears. "No," John interrupted, feeling an urge to delve deeper than the surface. "Let's do some research first. We need to understand what we're up against. If they impounded the car, there has to be documentation. We need to be ready for what comes next." They decided to head back to his apartment, a small space filled more with remnants of his chaotic life than any real comfort. Though it was hardly homey, it did offer them a chance to strategize, and it felt like the solid ground he craved. John set the report on his cluttered table, surrounded by stacks of papers, old takeout containers, and useless knickknacks that echoed his disorganized life. Katie took a seat, her focus unwavering. "I'll search for any public records related to the car's impoundment. If we can find out the legal reasons for it, we can prepare better," she said with a strength in her voice that stirred something within him. "Good idea," John replied, already grabbing his laptop and opening it. "Let's also look into other local cases, see if there's a pattern. If it's a wrongful impoundment, we'll have allies. We can frame our approach as not just for your father, but for anyone who might have suffered the same fate." As they settled into their research, John found himself shifting gears from victim to activist, fired up by a purpose he hadn't anticipated. Connecting dots became easier as they pieced together information. He learned about local regulations, what could legally justify an impound, and how often it was abused by authorities in situations that mirrored Katie's. Hours sped by as they drank cup after cup of coffee, and surrounded themselves with paperwork full of data and legal jargon. For the first time in a long while, John felt competent, eyes gleaming with potential solutions instead of self-doubt. He caught Katie's enthusiasm as she passionately pointed out how many cases were similar, how easy it had been for ordinary citizens to lose their vehicles, a reality that felt unjust. And then he noticed something amidst their findings, an article about a troublemaker in the system, someone who had a pattern of wrongfully taking repossessions and impounding them without proper justification. The name triggered a memory, tightening the knot in John's stomach. He had seen it mentioned in other warning signs around the neighborhood when he stumbled upon a few other vehicles just days before. "Wait a second," he said, piecing it together. "What if this is connected?" Katie leaned closer. "Connected how?" "If this person is involved, it could mean there's something corrupt in the system." John thought aloud, adrenaline flooding his senses. "We might have a case not just for the return of your father's car, but to expose something larger." As he formulated a plan, a cloud of uncertainty loomed over him. They were heading into uncharted territory, risking exposure to deeper conflicts he wasn't sure they could handle. Yet a part of him reveled in the rising stakes. The question lingering as they exhausted their research loomed larger than ever. Were they prepared to confront the necessary challenges that would arise, not just for the retrieval of the car, but for justice for others? As they closed their laptops, a new resolve ignited in John. He was no longer the bystander. He felt ready to take a stand. The stakes were higher now, and he could sense a confrontation brewing just beyond the shadows. They had triggered something significant. Before they could relax, Katie turned to him, eyes wide with realization. "We need to find out where they keep impounded cars. If we can get in there—" "Exactly," John replied, feeling the urgency pulse through him. This wasn't just about knowledge anymore. It was about action. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but he was certain of one thing. They had entered a dangerous game, and the final outcome remained uncertain. What awaited them as they pushed deeper into the truth? The next morning, light seeped into John's apartment, illuminating the clutter he had long ignored. His mind swirled with thoughts of their plan, a cocktail of hope and dread. The gravity of their research settled on him like an iron cloak. With each passing moment, he felt both exhilarated and terrified. The idea of confronting potential wrongdoing brought new stakes, demanding more courage than he had mustered in years. "Let's head to the impound lot before the day gets away from us," he said, shaking off sleep and gathering his thoughts. The resolve in Katie's expression spurred him on. He could sense that she was emboldened, ready to rise against the miscreants hiding behind bureaucratic shields. This wasn't just about her father's car anymore. It was a stand against injustice. They stepped out, the crisp air biting against their skin, invigorating their weary resolve. The car journey felt like the last step before plunging into unknown depths. As they approached the impound lot, the physical distance condensed into the woefully familiar feeling of anxiety pooling in John's stomach. "Remember our game plan," Katie said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Stick to the facts. Be strategic about our questions." He nodded and parked the car with renewed determination. The lot loomed ahead, a walled enclosure full of lost hopes and forgotten vehicles. As they walked toward the entrance, doubt crept in momentarily. John couldn't help but question if they were really prepared to unearth the truth, to confront whatever might be lurking in the shadows. Inside, the impound office was dim and cramped, filled with the buzzing of fluorescent lights. A stern-looking attendant waited behind the counter, glancing up from a screen to see them approach. "Can I help you?" he asked, tone neutral yet slightly wary. John cleared his throat, willing the confidence to rise. "We'd like information about a vehicle that was recently impounded. It belongs to Katie's father, and we're looking to understand the reason behind its impoundment." The man's eyes narrowed, skepticism washing across his features. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You'll need to fill out a request form for records of that vehicle. I can't just hand out information." Frustration bubbled in John's chest. They were already hitting walls. Yet retreating was not an option. "We believe there might be good reason to question the validity of this impound. There's evidence suggesting it wasn't handled right," he said, emphasizing their knowledge. The attendant momentarily studied them, measuring their resolve, then sighed. "Fine. What evidence do you have?" John inhaled sharply, feeling the rush of adrenaline unlike anything he had felt in a long time. He shared their findings. The wrongful cycle documented, complaints from other victims, the notorious name they had stumbled upon. As he spoke, he noted the man's reaction shift from detached irritation to guarded interest. "This is a serious accusation. the attendant replied slowly, as though weighing the implications. Katie chimed in. We just want to ensure that violations don't go unchecked. We're prepared to escalate this if we have to. The tension in the air thickened, the stakes heightening. They had transgressed from mere curiosity to active confrontation. John's heart raced, not from fear but from a deepening commitment to hold accountable anyone wronging others in a position of authority. Perhaps he had entered as a passive participant, but something within him had sparked. Give me a moment, the attendant finally said, rising from his seat. I'll see what I can uncover. As he disappeared into the back, John and Katie exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. There was no turning back. They had stirred a hornet's nest, and the question looming now was not just about the car, but about the shadows lurking within the system they were starting to uncover. A loud clattering echoed through the back as the attendant began rummaging through files. Anxiety prickled the air, but John felt the fire within him rise to meet the impending confrontation. Whatever comes next, he said to Katie, we face it together. We're not alone in this. The attendant returned, a folder in hand, the weight of it heavy with implications. I've got something for you, he said, eyes darting momentarily, hinting at layers of complexity. John's breath caught. What revelations lay within that folder? They could tip the scale completely. As they prepared to delve into the unknown, John realized one thing. This fight was just beginning, and they were ready to unearth the depths of deception. Would they uncover more than just the truth about the car? Would they spark a movement to challenge the dark forces manipulating lives? The moment of truth was closing in. John's mind raced as the attendant laid the folder on the counter. The nerves coiled tightly in his stomach released for a moment, just enough for him to take a steady breath. Inside that folder were answers, perhaps even the keys to unlocking something much more significant than they'd anticipated. Open it, Katie urged softly, her eyes bright with both apprehension and the glimmer of hope. He nodded, the gravity of the moment weighing heavily on him as he gingerly flipped open the folder. It contained a series of documents, impound records, reports filed by various officials, and a list of complaints logged by other vehicle owners. But more intriguing were the handwritten notes scrawled in the margins, observations and reminders that hinted at discrepancies. John could feel the tension in the air thickening. This wasn't merely about one vehicle anymore. This was a network of inadequacies, a systemic flaw reflected in the suffering of dozens, if not hundreds. Look here, he murmured, pointing to a note that read, Follow up on previous claims. Possible misconduct. Katie leaned in, her brows furrowing. It's like they knew something was off. Exactly. We need to dig deeper. This isn't about her father's car. It's about accountability. As they both delved into the documentation, John's resolve grew. This was now his fight too, one that ran far beyond personal grievances. Here lay a chance to challenge an entire framework of negligence, to give voice to the voiceless. The realization washed over him unexpectedly. It felt like stepping into a role he'd long abandoned, one of an advocate, a champion for justice. John, Katie's voice broke through his thoughts, shaking him from his reverie. She pointed to a section of the notes suggesting potential administrative connections between the impound lot and a local auto dealership known for its dubious practices. We need to follow this lead, she asserted. This could connect everything. He nodded, the adrenaline of the prospect invigorating his thoughts. Each name, each complaint could unveil a chain of failures, of people who thought they could act without consequence. Yet, as conviction surged within him, the shadows of doubt lingered. He had never been one to take the lead. He was the passive observer, the one who analyzed rather than acted. Suddenly a thought struck him. What if we could look into those dealership practices before we approach the lot again? We can't just raise concerns without solid evidence. That'll only lead to a dead end. Katie pursed her lips, considering this. Research would buy us credibility. If we can show a pattern of misconduct, we could challenge them more effectively. Her focus prompted a surge of clarity for John, leading him to consider his capabilities in a different light. The fear of acting impulsively lessened as he realized he could leverage what he hadn't yet believed in, his ability to uncover the truth through strategic analysis and evidence gathering. He remembered the way he had always excelled at piecing together intricate puzzles in his former job. Perhaps this situation was no different. He could be the detective here, navigating through deception to expose it for all to see. We need to align our efforts before we approach anyone, he suggested, a newfound determination surfacing in his voice. Katie smiled, enkindling a shared sense of purpose. It's time we take this to the next level. As they exited the impound office, folder in hand, a rush of exhilaration coursed through John. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he understood now that they were not just confronting an institution. They were re-educating themselves about their own capabilities and strengths. However, each step they took toward unearthing the truth held a new weight of responsibility. What if the investigation led them to more sinister practices, things that could put them at risk? Before we pursue anything else, he said, hesitating briefly. We should explore what we're up against first, just in case we stir up something dangerous. Katie's agreement was unspoken, yet palpable in the air between them. They both knew the gravity of their inquiry, and the implications it held not only for the victims, but for them as well. What awaited them was still unknown, hovering just beyond the thresholds of their resolve. How far could they push? How deep did the corruption go? As doubts crept back into his mind, John made an unspoken vow. He would face whatever was next, not just as a participant in Katie's fight for her father's car, but as someone determined to expose the truth lurking beneath the surface. Deep within, he felt the anticipation building, the moment inching closer, poised to cascade from discovery to realization, from investigation to confrontation, and perhaps, at long last, to resolution. As they drove away from the impound lot, the horizon loomed vast and intimidating, promising challenges yet to come. Would they be ready to confront the truth? Or would they trigger forces that might threaten their newfound resolve? The answer awaited just around the corner. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the streets as John and Katie returned to the cafe where they frequently strategized. The air felt charged with the promise of revelation. As they settled into a booth, John couldn't shake the feeling that a turning point awaited them, one that could either illuminate their path or throw them into chaos. Let's start by outlining what we know about the dealership, Katie said, her fingers tapping on her notepad. I found some online reviews that suggest a pattern of complaints, mostly about overcharging for repairs and questionable sales practices. Good. We need to expand that into a timeline. John replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The weight of the mission pressed on him. After all, they were not mere spectators. In this moment, he trusted his analytical abilities, allowing the dormant advocacy within him to surge forth. As Katie detailed the dealership's shaky reputation, John lost himself in thought. He envisioned gathering testimony from past customers, understanding their experiences, and harnessing those stories to form a compelling case. It was a role he had never envisioned for himself, a proactive seeker of truth, an ally for accountability. What if we could invite a few victims to the cafe? Share their experiences, Katie suggested. Real stories could amplify our findings. The idea sparked a flicker of excitement within him. Yes, testimonials can provide context and urgency, show how this drives beyond mere customer service issues. It's about integrity. But even as new resolve solidified within him, doubt wriggled viciously on the peripheries of his mind. Could ordinary citizens truly unseat an institution so entrenched? What if their findings only resulted in an echo chamber of lies? John's instinct had always been to analyze and hypothesize, but here, as a catalyst for change, he felt exposed. The stakes had escalated considerably. The thought of being rebuffed or ignored was daunting. "I'm a little anxious," he admitted, breaking a silence that had become nearly palpable. What if our efforts don't amount to anything? We've seen how close-knit these places can be. They might undermine our work. Katie gave a slight nod, her expression contemplative. Every change seems impossible until it's done. You have to believe that we're on the right path, that awareness is enough. Those who've suffered deserve this fight. Her words resonated with him, and John felt a jolt of motivation race through him. Perhaps he was right to step outside the confines of his old self. This new persona might emerge wielding the strength and credibility he hadn't realized he possessed. With newfound determination, he began to sketch out a plan. Compile the reviews, connect with potential witnesses, and formulate leads on how the dealership's practices linked back to the impound lot's operations. His heart raced with a heady mix of fear and exhilaration as the outlines of a strategy took shape. The day transitioned into evening, the cafe's ambient noise blending into a symphony of mutual determination. John and Katie began discussing the logistics, throwing around ideas for effective outreach to listeners through social media, perhaps even local forums where past customers congregated. A subtle shift had taken place within him. Each suggestion ignited an unexpected affinity for action. The prospect of facing antagonists now felt less daunting, more like a forge that would shape him into someone new, someone empowered. As they finalized their plans, a thought struck John. What if this venture led them to confront more than just fiscal irresponsibility? What if it unveiled connections that ran deeper, exposing societal failures? His pulse quickened at the possibilities. "Let's hope we're ready for whatever we uncover," he said, by now fully aware that this journey had the potential to upend both their lives and the lives of those who had suffered injustice. Katie met his gaze, a steely determination radiating from her. "Whatever is lurking below the surface, we'll face it. Together." The weight of that promise lingered as they stepped out of the cafe into the night. Shadows enveloped them like a cloak, reminding John of the challenges awaiting in the darkness. As they walked towards their next destination, he couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was not merely hidden. It was waiting patiently for them to uncover it. Suddenly, John's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. A notification flashed. "Local dealership under investigation." His heart raced. What was that about? What if their fight for accountability was about to thrust them into the middle of something far larger than either had anticipated? As John read the notification, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. The dealership was under investigation? The very institution they had been scrutinizing. The same one whose practices had cast a dark cloud over Katie's family. This could change everything. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, turning his phone to show Katie the alert. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "This could be it. Maybe they're closer to being exposed than we thought. Do you think we should reach out to the investigators?" Katie asked, excitement mixed with the uncertainty of their next steps. John took a moment to consider. "If we can provide them with our evidence, it could strengthen their case. But we need to approach this carefully. We don't want to jeopardize their investigation or get in over our heads." After a brief discussion, they decided to prepare a concise dossier, highlighting their findings, connections, and testimonies gathered thus far. Each step they took solidified their resolve. This was no longer merely about retrieving a single car, but about confronting a cycle of disgraceful practices they could no longer ignore. Over the next few days, John and Katie meticulously compiled their research. They built a narrative that chronicled the dealership's wrongdoings, clustering testimonials from individuals who had been affected, thus transforming their fears into a unified voice of resistance. As the pieces fell into place, John felt an unfamiliar confidence bloom within him. He was leading this effort, orchestrating a response to negligence. What had initially felt overwhelming began to morph into a passion that drove him forward. He was no longer the reluctant participant prioritizing family reputation over truth. Instead, he was a participant in a quest for justice. Once their dossier was complete, they made contact with the relevant authorities investigating the dealership. The candor with which John articulated their findings was transformative. He no longer hesitated or second-guessed. This was a presentation grounded in fact, and as he spoke, the nerves that once plagued him faded into certainty. "Together we've gathered crucial evidence that could support your investigation," John said, his voice steady, empowered by the depth of their collaboration. "Not just about my father-in-law's car, but a wider scheme of unethical practices that victimizes many clients." The investigator nodded, taking notes and asking pertinent questions that showed genuine interest. "This is significant. We can use this information. Good work getting this documented. Make sure to keep your readers informed." In that moment, a wave of pride washed over John. They had stepped out of the shadows armed with evidence and clarity. What's more, he felt a bond with Katie burn deeper between them. Their aim was not just personal, but communal. He had transformed from being a passive observer within his family to a proactive force against systemic corruption. As they left the station, Katie beamed, her face illuminated by a raw excitement. "We did it! I can't believe how far we've come in just a few weeks," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Yes, and it's just the beginning," John replied, a smile forming across his face. Together they had not only taken a stand, but had also reclaimed their collective narrative. Days turned into a week, and as the investigation gathered momentum, the community began to respond. People stepping forward to share their experiences, rallying for change. They ignited conversations that reverberated through the small town. Then came the moment of reckoning. The local newspaper ran a front-page article titled, "Corruption Uncovered, Dealership Under Fire," detailing John and Katie's findings. It painted their story in shades of triumph and advocacy, resonating far beyond the realm of their immediate family issue. John watched as the community reacted. The same neighbors and faces that had once whispered judgment now engaged the narrative of resilience and redemption. Their family's name, previously tainted by rumors, was now reclaiming its dignity through action and integrity. What a transformation, he thought, realizing how far he had come, how much he had grown. He was no longer afraid of what others thought. Instead, he stood tall in the clarity of his beliefs, leading in a fight that felt right. At the cafe where it had all begun, Katie and John sat across from each other, savoring a moment of calm amidst the chaos. They had conquered their fears, exposed faults, and taken charge of their narrative. "Look where we are now," Katie said, her smile contagious. "Yeah," John replied, a deep-seated satisfaction enveloping him. "We didn't just retrieve a car. We reclaimed a part of ourselves." Their journey had evolved beyond mere family conflicts and into a broader fight for accountability. John recognized that he had developed a solid confidence in his ability to challenge injustice. Through this ordeal, he had proven that true fulfillment arises from courage, collaboration, and unwavering resolve. As the sun set on the horizon, illuminating their shared journey, a new chapter awaited them. One filled with promise and greater understanding. He could face anything alongside Katie. They were emboldened by what they had achieved. They were ready to embrace whatever was next. "Now it's your turn." Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire and empower. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your thoughts matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories know how vital it is to advocate for change.